The Stella Prize is an Australian book award for women and non-binary authors. It actively includes trans people, with several having been on the list in the past. And this week, they announced their long list of 12 books. Before we go through them, I just want to tell you two quick things about the prize. Up on the screen now is all of the dates that you need to know about, which are a little bit on the snappy side for me. And the books can be fiction, non-fiction, poetry, or really anything, as long as it is published in 2024 in Australia. Let's go through the books. Peripathetic, Notes on Unbelonging by Cher Tang. Peripathetic is about shit jobs, about being who you are and who you aren't online, about knowing a language 4 times, about living on the interstices, about thievery, about wanting, about the hyper-real, about weirdness. Cher Tan's essays are as non-linear as her life, as she travels across borders that are simultaneously tightening and blurring. In luminous and inventive prose, they look beyond the performance of everyday life, seeking answers that continually elude, paying homage to the many outside artists, punks, dropouts and rogue philosophers who came before. This book is about the resistance of orthodoxies, even when it feels impossible. This sounds weird, and it sounds like that's the point of it, leaving me both skeptical and really intrigued. By the way, if you've read any of these books, let us know in the comments section if you liked them or what you thought of them in general, especially for books like this one, books that are pretty underground and will benefit from the exposure that this prize is offering them. The Thinning by Inga Simpson. Finn grew up by an observatory, learning about telescopes and planets, inspired by the passion of her parents, then leaders in their field of astrophotography and astronomy. Those days are over. Now Finn, her mother, Dianella, and a band of outliers live deep off the grid, always on Amber Alert, always ready to run. In the outside world, things are not good. Extinctions and a loss of diversity threaten what is left of the environment. With a new disaster looming, Finn finds herself thrust into an unlikely partnership with a stranger who appeared in their camp. One of a new breed of evolved humans, the Incompletes, who are widely distrusted. But the pair will need to work together during a dangerous journey if they are able to play their part in an audacious plan to help restore the natural world, the humankind. Inga Simpson is one of those authors who is always getting praise and attention in the Australian literary scene for what seems like a series of very good book. And I say seems because shamefully I've never read her work, but she's a little like an Aussie version of somebody like Elif Shafak, Louise Erdrich or Maggie O'Farrell. Not stylistically, but she's a writer of recognised quality who people are always going to love and buy. She has a reputation for both being safe and quality. And this book is really intriguing. And as long as I can find a copy of it, I am finally going to read one of Inga Simpson's novels. It sounds great. The Burrow by Melanie Cheng. Amy, Jin, and Lucy are leading isolated lives in their partially renovated inner city home. They are not happy, but they're also terrified of change when they buy a pet rabbit for Lucy, and then Amy's mother Pauline comes to stay. The family is forced to confront a long-buried secret. Will opening their hearts to a rabbit help them to heal or only invite further tragedies? The Burrows tell an unforgiving story about grief and hope. With her characteristic compassion and eye for detail, Melanie Cheng reveals the lives of others, even of a small rabbit. Now, I've read this book and it is meant to be quite impactful, and I can see why, but unfortunately I just found it a little bit forgettable. This is the sort of book I read a lot of and it's just not special. I'm sorry. Nag Mountain by Manisha Anjali, a remarkable debut collection by an Australian and New Zealand poet of Indo-Fijian background, the descendant of indentured labourers. Nag Mountain is an imagined recovery of the little-known cultural inheritance of a displaced and exploited people. Historical figures, folk characters, and spirits are entwined in a narrative poem coloured by the surrealism of dream. A community whose ancestors from India were indentured by the colonial sugar refining company to labour on sugar plantations in Fiji receives their dreams as messages from their friends across the Tasman. A mysterious reel of film washes ashore in Port Douglas, depicting harrowing violence under the indentured system. The historical actors walk out of the film and into the living world. The community walks into the projection. The nag, the thousand-mouthed snake, conjures a floating mountain lined with flowering trees, mists and dreams. Colonial Sugar Refining Company, CSR. If you're an Australian watching this, Bundaberg Sugar doesn't dehome Indigenous people at gunpoint, nor do they have a history of human rights abuse and contributing to mass deforestation. Also, they're carbon neutral. Bundaberg Sugar. Fiji has a large population of people of Indian descendants or ethnicity, and I always find it really interesting to see how two cultures blend or blur to create a new people. Surrealism isn't my thing. Combine that with poetry and it seems very confusing. But there is definitely some very interesting topics and ideas discussed here. Rapture by Emily Maguire. The motherless child of an English priest living in the 9th century Maines. Agnes is a wild and brilliant girl with a deep, visceral love of God. At 18, to avoid the future as a wife or nun, Agnes enlists the help of a love-sick Benedictine monk to disguise himself as a man and devote her life to the study she is denied as a woman. So begins the life of John the Englishman, a matchless scholar and scribe of the revered Fulda monastery, then a charismatic heretic in an Athens commune, and by her middle years, a celebrated teacher in Rome. There, Agnes, as John, dazzles the church hierarchy with her knowledge and wisdom and finds herself at the heart of political intrigue in a city where gossip is a powerful and deadly currency. And when the only person who knows her identity arrives in Rome, she will risk everything to once again feel what it is to be known and loved. Cactus Pear from My Beloved by Sama Sabawai. A story from Gaza. The story of a family over the past 100 years, starting in Palestine under British rule and ending in Redland Bay in Queensland. Sama Sabawai shares the story of her parents and many like them who were born as their parents were being forced to leave their homelands. Filled with the love for lands, histories, people, it is more than anything else a family story and a love story told with enormous humanity and feelings. How the son, one of 6, born at the height of the displacement to a disabled father and illiterate mother, a believer in peaceful resistance, became a leading poet and writer in Palestine before being forced, with his own young family in tow, to flee and start a new life in Australia. One of the gifts of Sama Sabawai's Baba is to remain open-hearted and optimistic. Always Will Be by Michaela Saunders. In this stunningly inventive and thought-provoking collection, Michaela Saunders poses the question, what might country, community and culture look like in the Tweed if Kooris reasserted their sovereignty? Each of the stories in Always Will Be is set in its own future version of the Tweed. In one, a group of girls plot their escape from a home they have no memory of entering. In another, 2 men make a final visit to a country they love as they contemplate a new life in a faraway place. Saunders imagines different scenarios for how the local Koori community might reassert sovereignty, reclaiming country, exerting full self-determination, or incorporating non-Indigenous people into the social fabric, while practicing creative, ancestrally approved ways of living with changing climates. Epic in scope and with a diverse cast of characters, Always Will Be is a groundbreaking winner of the 2022 David Unipon award. This is a forward-thinking collection that refuses cynicism and despair, instead offering entertaining stories that celebrate Koori's ways of being, knowing, doing and becoming. For my non-Aussie viewers, the title is a reference to the rally cry, "Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land." Koori or Koori was often used when I was young by white people as a more respectful or PC way of saying Aboriginal, but is actually referring to a large group of Indigenous Australians and was often misused to mean all Indigenous Australians. Michaela Saunders is Lebanese Koori, so she is likely using it correctly, one would imagine. Finally, the Tweed is a region around Tweed Head. It is the northernmost point of New South Wales, bordering the Gold Coast. This sounds like a really interesting collection of stories, but it absolutely needs to be done well to work. And I'm pleased to say that there is a lot of really positive reviews to complement the long listing here and in other places. This looks like a really promising collection. Black Convicts: How Slavery Shaped Australia by Santilla Shingapi. Non-fiction, which is not usually my thing, but if you're not at least a little bit interested based on the title of this book, then I just don't understand you. On the First Fleet of 1788, at least 15 convicts were of African descent. By 1840, the number had risen to almost 500. Among them were David Sturman, a revealed South African chief transported for anti-colonial insurrection; John Caesar, who became Australia's first bushranger; Billy Blue, a stylishly dressed ferryman who gave his name to Sydney's Blues Point; and William Cuffay, a prominent London Chartist who led the development of Australia's labour movement. Two of the youngest were cousins from Mauritius, girls aged just 9 and 12, and sentenced over a failed attempt to poison their mistress. But although some of these lives were well documented and their likeness hangs in places like the National Portrait Gallery, even their descendants are unaware of their existence. By uncovering lines whitewashed out of our history in stories spanning Africa, the Americas and Europe, Black Convicts also traces Australia's hidden link to slavery, which both powered the British Empire and inspired the convict system itself, situating European settlement in its global context. Black Convicts shows the injustice of dispossession was driven by the engine of labour exploitation and will change the way we think about who we are. Every fact in that summary is new to me, and this book is giving me real heavy Dark Emu vibes because it's correcting Australia's whitewash history. It's challenging assumptions that we have about our past, and I just love that. Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle. The first love of a teenage girl is a powerful thing, particularly when the object of that desire is her best friend, also a girl. It's a kind of power that could implode a family, a friendship, a life. On a quiet summer's night in Newcastle, 1972, a choice must be made: to act upon these desires or suppress them, to live an openly queer life or to try desperately not to. Over the following 3 decades, two lives almost intersect in pivotal moments, the distance between them at times drawing so thin they nearly collide against the backdrop of an era including Australia's first Mardi Gras and the AIDS pandemic. We see two lives ebb and flow with joy and grief and loss and desire until at last they come together in the most beautiful and surprising of ways. A Language of Limbs is about love and how it's policed, friendship and how it transcends, and hilarity in the face of heartbreak, an unashamed celebration of queer life in all its vibrancy and colour. This story finds the humanity in all of us and demands we claim our future for ourselves. This is meant to be overwhelmingly emotional, and it sounds really tempting. Theory and Practice by Michelle de Kreitzer. It's 1986 and beautiful radical ideas are in the air. A young woman arrives in Melbourne to research the novels of Virginia Woolf. In bohemian St Kilda, she meets activists, artists, students, and Kit. He claims to be in a deconstructed relationship and they become lovers. Meanwhile, her work on the Wolf Mother falls into disarray. Theory and Practice is a memorizing account of desire and jealousy, truth and shame. It makes and unmasks fiction as we read, expanding our notion of what a novel can contain. I really struggled with this one. I DNF'd it, but it's very definitely fiction for a certain type of reader. Black Witness, The Power of Indigenous Media by Amy McQuire. For one of this country's leading Indigenous journalists comes a collection of fierce and powerful essays proving why the media needs to believe Black Witnesses. Black Witnesses showcases how journalism can be used to hold the powers to account and make the world a more equitable place. This is the essential collection that we need right now and we always have. Sounds important, and just while I'm here, fuck Murdoch. Translations by Jumania Abdu. Amid a series of personal disasters, Alaya and her daughter Sakina retreat to rural New South Wales to make a new life. Alaya manages to secure a rundown property and hires a farmhound, Shep, an extremely private Palestinian man, and the region's imam. During a storm, she drives past the town's river and happens upon a childhood friend, Hannah, who has been living a life of desperation. Alaya takes her in and tries to navigate the indefinable relationship between both Hannah and her farmhand. Tension rises as Alaya's growing bond with Shep strains her devotion to Hannah. Finally, all are thrown together by a reckoning alongside Hannah's brother Hashim and Alaya's confidant Billy, a local midwife she meets working at the hospital while bushfires rage around them. Sounds promising, and I do love a history of Australia sort of historical fiction that isn't white, because sure, white people may have been the majority, but they haven't been the only population, and it is time that our literature corrects that. I hope at least one of these Aussie books caught your eyes. I know that they can be hard to track down or expensive, so put in a request to your local library to buy a copy. Trust me, libraries love these sort of requests, even if they turn them down. It's useful data for them. Aussie literature is terrible at getting out there as well, and it really needs your help if you are an international viewer. But if you're an Aussie viewer, they should be at least a little bit easier to come by. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye.